know that a lot of them come from Town Hall in New York City. Well, after the service, my friend introduced me to Raymond Charles Barker, who was a very big person, both in voice, size, and demanding your attention. And so he gave me a book. And I told him I had just gotten involved approximately, about 8 months before. And he said, "Are you reading Ernest and my book?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I got a copy of the Science of Mind textbook." And he said, "Well, that's great, but you need my book." And so he wasn't shy. He had no retardation about telling you how great he was, which is one of the reasons I liked him so much. Anyhow, the book, I'm showing it to you now. This is a scene from my backyard on the cover. And that halo light you see is supposed to be over my head. I can't quite get it there though. Anyhow, the book is called 365 Days of Richer Living, and it's authored by Ernest Holmes and my teacher, which of course is Ernest Holmes also, but Reverend Raymond Charles Barker. And I have to tell you, if you do not have this book, get it. Don't even think about it. Get it. And go on Amazon and get it, because every day there is a lesson and then a treatment, and there's nothing to compare to it. I'm that certain about the truth of what I say, because this book is available, by the way, on Amazon. You can get it off Amazon, and it's something you should have by your bedside. You should get 2 copies by your bedside, have one at work if you do go to work, and maybe you're all working at home now, but you should have it with you because it will be such an inspiration for the day in which you are in. And the lessons in it are wonderful, and they alternate. You will be able to decipher Raymond Charles Barker from Ernest Holmes. I call Ernest a romantic writer. I call Raymond a New Thought writer. He originally came out of Unity, School of Practical Christianity, and became an ordained minister in Unity in 1939, the year I was born, not by accident, I'm sure. Anyhow, if you get this book, you're going to like it a lot. And this is one of the books, since Reverend Ramona asked me to mention what books I read every day. I do read this one. As I said, I read an original book, the first book that Ernest wrote, I think back in 1917, called Creative Mind and Success. That's available on Amazon. Just so that we're on the books, I'm going to go through them so I can get off selling books. The other book I read every day is by Dr. Raymond Charles Barker, called Spiritual Healing for Today, which I understand is currently out of print. I'm in the process of republishing it. I happen to own the rights to this book, and Richer Living, I own half of that because Raymond wrote it, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. And this is another book I read every day, which is the Dory Lectures by Thomas Trower. Now, I also read the textbook every day, and as most of you probably know, there is a lesson for everyday reading in the textbook, and if you do the lesson, you will have gone through the textbook entirely in 1 year. And if you need to know what the lesson is, if you have a new copy of the textbook, like I'm showing you right here, mine is a leather-bound one because I'm a minister. but you can get it too. You can be a minister to yourself in your own right. Get the big one. And in the front of it is a listing of all the lessons for every day of the year. And you can go to it, and it's fabulous. And it takes you all of probably 1.5 to 3 minutes to read it. And then I also read this book. I'm getting to the end now. Don't get impatient. This is the book, The Power in You by Thomas Trower. And this book contains all 6 of his books. And I read it every day. I read probably 2 pages, because Thomas Trower is a logical thinker. He lived in India for 25 years, in the Punjab region of India, and he was a divisional judge for the British Crown. And so he writes in what is referred to as pure logic. In other words, if you're going to come before him in a court, and you have to file a brief, which all attorneys that are in court have to, both the defending attorney and the opposing attorney, which I guess is the court attorney. You have to write a brief that summarizes logically how you got to the conclusion that your brief states for the court, which Trower had to read because he was the judge, as to why this person or persons or company or whatever should be released from whatever the charge is, or should be granted compensation because somebody violated the legal rights of somebody else. So the idea behind it is that Trower is always talking in logic. Now, I'm going to read something from this very briefly, and it states, it's in the preface of the new textbook, written by Ken Gordon, who used to be the leader, spiritual leader of the church. And he writes, let me begin with this. Let's see. Ernest Sherlock Holmes was born on January 21, 1887, in Lincoln, Maine. When he was a child, his family referred to him as a perpetual question mark. He learned to read with an annotated Bible, and at 12 years of age, discovered a volume of Ralph Waldo Emerson's essays through his older brother. The inspiration from Emerson and the other transcendentalists marked him for life, and he began his studies in earnest when he set out giving talks throughout America. As a young man, he briefly studied Christian Science, and he discovered through its teachings of Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, who is known as the father of New Thought. He was also a man from Maine. He was an ordained divine science minister, speaking to crowds in Los Angeles, many thousands, by the way, when he discovered what he considered to be the missing component in his own personal religious philosophy. That was Judge Thomas Trower, an Anglican judge in India who had written a book called the Edinburgh Lectures on mental science. When Holmes discovered this missing link, in quote, end of quotes, even though he in no way stopped his studies, it is said that he felt he had completed his philosophical foundation. Now, let me just give you a little background on how I became a Trowardian. So in the first few years of my studies, which began in the fall of 1967, I took the 30-week extension course, which still is published by Science of Mind Publication. This was before Zoom and computers, and they would send every week a booklet to my home, and I would read the booklet, the assignment, the study, and I'd take a test, and then I'd have to send it back into headquarters, which was then in Los Angeles, and they would grade my book and send me a new one for the next week. So for 30 weeks, I took that course and graduated. Then I decided that I wanted to be able to be where Ernest Holmes was. I wanted, in fact, I had a fantasy of being able to sit in the chair, this big sort of grand chair that you'd think you'd see in, Westminster Abbey or something in London. And so I decided that I was going to move to Los Angeles so I could retake the first year class in person with instructors at the Institute of Religious Science. And that's what I did. I moved to Los Angeles. In the summer before I moved, I met the practitioner who was instrumental in my moving, and that was Dr. Fatura Papke, who was the practitioner for none less than Dr. Ernest Holmes. And I thought, well, that's the one I want, and I'll not only get to sit in his chair, I'll get to sit in front of his practitioner, and God, there's still hope for me. So that's how it started. And I went through 3 years of study. And then, of course, I decided I would start professional studies because it was clear to me that I planned to become a minister in the movement at some point. But it's more important than becoming a minister, and I say this with all due respect to you, Reverend Ramona, I really didn't care about being a minister so much as I wanted to be a practitioner. Because at the time of my conversion, I was in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit with a very, very powerful man who was in this suit that I was filing against him, and he was filing against me, and all sorts of things like that. And it was just so debilitating that I thought, I think I'd rather die than go on living like that. And it was during that period, 1967, when I got introduced to religious science. On Easter Sunday, I was resurrected. I was resurrected, I'm sorry, on that Sunday morning. And I thought, if I have been born again to want to go and study this teaching, I've got to pursue it until I become a practitioner. So that's exactly what I did. And I graduated in 1972. I moved to the Bay Area from Los Angeles so I could take 2 years of study as a practitioner with Dr. Robert Scott, whose church was located and his institute was located in San Jose and Los Gatos, California. I became a practitioner at the end of 1972. And I have to tell you, it was the happiest day of my life. And about a week later, Dr. Scott called me and said, I got a call from home office, and the director of practitioner and ministerial license wants you to come down there with me when I go next week. And I thought, my God, I've only had my shingle for a week and I'm already in trouble. So anyhow, I went down to LA with Dr. Scott. We met with who was then the director, Dr. Elmer Gifford. And he said to me, I see you've become a practitioner. Congratulations, but you're wasting your time. You're a shotgun doing a BB guns work. You need to become a minister. Well, at that time, you know, it was very flattering to my ego. And the truth is, if the truth be known, I sold out. And I decided that they knew better than me. I wonder if anybody else has this kind of memory regarding their earlier years, always thinking somebody knew more better for you than you knew for yourself. Well, I was still in that loop then. And I ceased being a practitioner, although of course I kept my license. And I started a 2-year course that was taught at the Institute down in San Jose to become a religious science minister. And I graduated in June of 1974. That's the 7-year span that Betty referred to earlier. So then I, of course, began right away. They gave me an emergency license because I wasn't even tested to graduate to be ordained or anything, to go up to Napa, California. And I was there to relieve a minister who had become ill. And so I stayed there 7 months before I went back to San Francisco Bay Area where I was living. And I got a call from the church in Burlingame, San Mateo, saying the minister had left unexpectedly. And they wondered if I would come. It was Friday, I got the call, and come down there and give them a talk. So they had somebody on Sunday. And so I agreed to go down. And 5 years later, at the end of my 5th year of being the minister there, I moved back to San Francisco, and I started my own church from scratch. And that church now is called the Golden Gate Center of Spiritual Living. And it's moved across the Golden Gate Bridge in Marin County, and it's 38 years old. And its minister now is Reverend Mary Shelton. And I'm so happy that church is still going. And I took a hiatus after 5 years. I went to Japan. I wanted to study Buddhism. Then I went to work for Rothschild's Bank because my early career before I went into the ministry was working on Wall Street for a large investment banking company. And so I went to work for Rothschild's Bank for 5 years and put my ministry on hold, took a leave of absence because I was feeling that there was a lot of, I think Reverend Ramona said it, peace, poise, and power. Those 3 wonderful words of Ernest Holmes. But when you've got peace, poise, and power, what happens next? And I wasn't seeing demonstrations of what happened next. And so by that time, I had really gotten into Trower. As I said, I started reading Trower in 1974. And like the many people that have commented earlier, it was a stretch. It was a stretch, and yet I needed to be stretched because I thought I had mastered Science of Mind, which of course you never do, because I read Science of Mind, as I said, every day, and every day I've grown. And guess what? The teaching has grown because I've never read the same thing and had the same meaning continuously. I can tell you, I read it yesterday, and today I read it again. And I read my 365 on the lesson today is God is my companion. And I thought, I've read this for so many years. This is about the 43rd year I've been reading this book. And it said something entirely new to me. I read the lesson in Science of Mind textbook, and it felt new to me. I'm now, talking to you, of course, without notes. Some of you are probably thinking, I wish he had some notes, but that's what my shift from just reading Science of Mind into Trower did for me. It gave me the understanding of what peace, poise, and power leads you to. Because the most important thing is for us to realize something we say in the first statement of a spiritual mind treatment. And that is this: there is one life. That life is God. And that life is my life. And that life is your life. It does not say there is one life for Lloyd Tupper and another life for God, the Spirit, the all-originating principle of life. And I had the hardest time even though I said it every day, there is one life, that life is God, that life is my life. And then I would go on to recognition, identification, declaration, acceptance, however it all goes. But you know what? I didn't understand the logic of it. I was like Ernest Holmes. I did not understand the logic of what the spiritual mind treatment was saying effectively to those who follow this art form of prayer, until I was so interested in how Ernest put that treatment together logically. As a result, as I said to you in reading the preface from Dr. Ken Gordon, our former spiritual leader of our movement, because when Ernest was writing the textbook, and he had formulated, which he claimed to be the only original thing that he contributed to our philosophy, because he said he drew all the various aspects of how our philosophy came together in the Science of Mind textbook from all the great religious, philosophical theories and practices throughout the world at that time. But he also attributed that he couldn't put treatment together, which was his primary contribution, until he got the logic out of reading Trower. Now, I know some of you have already expressed the difficulty in reading Thomas Trower, so I'm going to give you a shortcut. I'm going to tell you that if you do treatment daily and you can pick up the Edinburgh Lectures, which is the first book that Thomas Trower ever wrote, you need to jump ahead to the Dory Lectures, the one I told you I read every day, and I'll tell you why. Because even though the Edinburgh Lectures is an important book for you to read, this refinement of the Edinburgh Lectures, which was his second book, called the Dory Lectures, is more clarified and to the point. Like right now, I'm having to read on death and immortality. Now, normally, when I introduce myself, like when I used to speak at Asilomar, I'd say, my name is Lloyd George Tupper, and I am an immortal incarnation of one infinite life that is God. That's who I am. I don't claim to be all of God, but I claim to be of God. There's no separation. Now, isn't that what we say in the first step of treatment? And that is what Ernest Holmes got from Trower. There's only one life. That life is God. And that life is my life today and every day. And it's always been my life. And it will be my life when I decide the appropriate time to put this physical body down and return it to the earth from which it came. My body is material from the earth. From dust thou was made, to dust thou shalt return. A better way of saying that, which we're all rewriting the scriptures, is from the earth thou was made, and to the earth you will return. And if you're a Trowardian and you really understand the science of mind, philosophy, and spirit, you will decide when you put this body down and when you go to the next higher realm. And if you don't do that, why don't you? Did you know in the beginning of our movement, back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, that many of the New Thought people that came into our movement made a proclamation of the date they would pass over, the time that they would pass over, and the date. And they would go to bed or lie down on the couch. I'm sure it was sort of like a grand salon that you'd expect to see in some apartment or condo in Paris, you know, for all the lying back in those sort of salons they used to have there. And those people passed over. They absolutely had control of their bodily functions. And how was that possible? Because they realized they weren't their body. They were a spirit, a part of the original spirit that is God, that clothed itself in a human body, and that this body was strictly for the expression of that spiritual life on this earth. So when this body did not facilitate their perfect expression, then they would decide, well, it's obviously time for this body to return to the earth, and my spirit and so-called soul, which is just an accumulation of everything we've ever been conscious of, ever, in a previous life. I don't know anything about a previous life. One day I thought I'd be cute and say, yes, I remember I was a tulip in a previous life, but that, you know, I just happen to love tulips, but I don't know about anything about being a tulip. But I do know, and if you read Trower, you will know that when you go high into a higher realm, you aren't going to show up like we showed up in this realm. You're going to show up with the accumulated conscious thoughts that you had in this life, that you have subjectified in this life, and they have become a part of your immortal soul. So as spirit and soul goes forward, when you put your physical body down without a lot of hoses going in your ear and in your nose or other orifices of our body, we will remember what we experienced on this earth, and we will be able to pick up in a new body in the realm of which we find ourselves, and remember all the things we learned while we were here. And we'll be able, as Trower says, to clothe ourselves in a new body befitting where we are in that next realm, and go unto all the various planets and maybe into the cosmos itself, with a body that functions in that realm. Now, for those of us, and I saw all our pictures, some of you are much biologically younger than I am. But when you reach my biological age, by the way, I'll be 82. I'll start my 83rd year in a year. I'll be 82 years old this coming June. Now, we who are mature, or what I like to call in our platinum years, not our golden years, but our platinum years, we like to think of ourselves through the immortal principle. And you know why? It takes all the fear and worry and all, you know what it does? It takes the lack of demonstrating prosperity away. Because I think, now this is my conjecture, that people actually prepare to die most of their adult life. Because when they do not ascertain with good philosophical and spiritual understanding that they are the immortal principle of that one life that is spirit, then they know they're going to die someday. And when I hear people say, well, you might as well spend it now because, we're all going to die and all our heirs will be spending their inheritance and we will have not enjoyed it. And I thought to myself, well, that makes no sense. I think, like Raymond Barker taught me, that enough money is to meet all of my requirements and to have money set aside for whenever I choose to have my luxuries. And that's why I've always demonstrated prosperity. I don't wait to die to see how much money I'm going to have. I spend it as I go with the understanding I'll always have more than sufficient monies to meet all of my obligations on time and have money set aside for those luxuries when I decide to go to Paris for lunch. Now, I can hear you laughing, but that is the way Dr. Barker trained me. And then I trained myself. And how did I do it? By reading Tommy every day. Look, there's something in here that I know you'll like, a chapter on receptivity, which tells us how to be receptive to the gifts of God that are being offered to you every single day. But if you think you're unworthy and that you're not of that one life that is God, how are you going to accept them? Here's another word, another chapter, the law of growth. We all have to function in the law of growth because the law of growth is why I'm 83 years old or 82 years old. I've already moved myself a year ahead. Here's another one, causes and conditions. Everything that we have in our life that we see as a condition, what caused it? Every condition you have in your life right now, where you live, how much money you have, the health of your body, the excitement in your life or lack of excitement in your life, the mobility of your life, what kind of car you drive, how happy or unhappy you are, how healthy or unhealthy, it all came from one impersonal, causative action. Now, I gotta make sure I don't run over here because I can get going here. And I see I've only got 3 minutes left. Oh my gosh. If you have been in science of mind for a while, you've gotten your teeth into this way of thinking, this new thought. But if you, especially, I saw you all earlier now that you're in these mature years, let's call it maturity, okay? You need Trower. And this is the secret to Trower. Trust me on this. Is what Dr. Scott told me. When he asked me to give, I was elected, I guess, the valedictorian of my ministerial class. And that's the year I discovered Trower, my graduation in 1974. He said, you've been talking about reading Trower. You're reading The Hidden Power. And I said, yes, there are little vignettes in there, and I'm starting to understand what Trower's all about. He said, great, I'd like you to give the graduating lecture on Trower. And I said, you got to be kidding, Bob. Now, I'm 7 years in, so I'm calling him by his first name, Bob. It was Dr. Robert Scott. And I said, that's impossible. I don't even understand this man yet. Like everybody that talked about Trower before we started today. Have you read Trower? Or I can't read Trower or whatever. He said, Lloyd, for God's sake, be a religious scientist. And I said, what do you mean? He said, Lloyd, do you think if you've read one chapter of Trower, you haven't lodged it in your subjective consciousness? You're not just consciously reading, but if you're reading it and you have feeling, it goes automatically into your use of the one subjective mind that is the representation of spirit in you. That's why we call it universal mind in me, is the same as calling it subjective. And my subjective mind is just a portion of the universal subjective mind, which is why people can say the kingdom of God is within you. So if you've read the book, Lloyd, then you already know it. Just go to the pulpit and open your mouth and demand that your subjective use of mind gives you all the information that you need to have to give a fabulous graduation talk on Thomas Trower. And that's exactly what I did. Now, that takes a little bit of faith, but look, you're working with the mind of God. Your conscious mind is part of the mind of God. Your subjective mind is the universal presence of God in you, and it knows everything you will ever need to know. So why don't you use it? You know why? Because you learned peace, poise, and power, but you didn't learn what to do with that power and how to use that power. For didn't Ernest Holmes say, when he met Trower, he got the missing link and thereby completed the formula for spiritual mind treatment. So I'll close with this. If it was good enough for Ernest, maybe, just maybe, Trower is good enough for us. Thank you and good morning to all of you, future Trowardians.
Oh, and thank you, Reverend Lloyd.
You're welcome.
That was fantastic, marvelous. And there are comments in the chat already that people are excited to hear more from you. So I suspect they're formulating their questions for you now. So we'll stay tuned with that. Thank you. And you just have re-inspired me to dip my toe back into Trower again.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
Emma is my gal, so I like her.
Ramona, you will not regret it. Read the Dory Lectures.
We will do that. So, may I ask, we're going to do our offering now, but following the offering, could I ask you to do a treatment for Mountainside Community?
Why don't I do both?
You may do both.
Let's take a moment of privilege. This is our moment of privilege. And go within and remember there is peace. We are poised. And now that unlimited power that Ernest Holmes talked about when he opened his radio program, there is a power for good in this universe, and you can use it. To which I've added, and you are using it all the time that you're thinking. So I know right now that all of us are in touch with that power, and that power is waiting for our direction. For the principle of that power is that it waits on us to direct it. It coexists with spirit. We are individualized spirit. I am spirit. You are spirit. And so for all of us, and for the Mountainside Center of Spiritual Living, I do direct that power to bring about such an upheaval within the consciousness of this community and all those who are irresistibly being drawn by the vibration of my voice to come together to financially support this community with our tithe. And albeit to say that tithe will flourish this community, but a selfish knowingness on my part is that it will flourish those who tender that tithe. Because when we give of ourself and our substance to a spiritual endeavor, the way we think subconsciously about ourselves is so great and so wonderful and so flourishing in opulence of thinking that we open ourselves to receive the divine influx of spiritual ideas as to how to prosper in this thing called life, how to heal, how to restore, how to regenerate, how to further and deepen our realization of our own immortality as the life of God itself, personified by whatever name we are individually known by. So I know for you, I know for this wonderful community, I know for everyone who's attuned to us on this live broadcast, and everyone who's attuned to a vibration of truth throughout this planet, that they are merging with us to bring about a new dawn, a new beginning, a new resurrection of the truth that is indeed setting us free. It's healing our bodies, our affairs, our use of the one mind. And it is bringing forth such a joyous happiness that we are rendered without word. Let us give thanks for this. Let us rejoice for this. And do let it be so. And so it is. Amen.